Psych Monologues. I am Dr. Ray Mitsch, your host, and we are embarking on another week. And for us, at least here in Colorado and CCU, for me, it is 1 week closer to the end of summer. But it's probably been long over for quite some time. Anyway, good to have you. I'm glad that we have the opportunity just to spend a few minutes of time, maybe 25 to 30 or so, to give you something to think about. Hopefully, you are listening to the Psych Monologues, and I created it over a year ago just in response to communicating with my students, and it's grown to become much more than that. But the Psych Monologues is a podcast that explores in a three-way intersection, the intersection of faith, of psychology, and spiritual formation, and looking at those in not in a collision, but in some way that begins to make some sense. Because I think in a lot of ways, psychology and spirituality have a lot to share with one another in terms of understanding the depth of who we are and engaging the journey that we are called to be a part of and to walk. And so that's what the Psych Monologues purpose is to do. I have a lot of material that is coming down the road that I have to put into a format that is useful for people to experience. I will tell you that it has happened and is done. That I was privileged and honored to be able to spend some time with KJ Ramsey, who wrote the book called This Too Shall Last. And it was a delightful interview, and it will be featured in the next 2 weeks for you to be able to listen to. And then after that, we will be taking some time to listen into a conversation between a psychologist and a theologian about love, self-love, selfishness, and all the issues that tend to kind of crop up around that. Hopefully, you will have you will find it entertaining. Certainly, I think at least half of the duo, not me, is certainly entertaining. I'm not. I spend half my time rolling my eyes in talking to my friend Matt Jones, who's the theologian, but has a lot more profundity to offer than I do. And so we had a conversation around that issue, and we're going to put it on the podcast for everybody to enjoy. So the next 3 or 4 episodes are going to be jam-packed, and I would encourage you not to miss it, because certainly the time that I got to spend with KJ Ramsey was thought-provoking, inspiring, and challenging all at the same time, and she was a delight to be able to spend some time with. So that being said, I wanted to mention to you that we are nearing a mind-boggling milestone for this podcast. Never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams would I have ever expected to hit a milestone like this, but we are only 23 downloads away from 3,000 downloads. This literally blows my mind. I never, ever in my wildest dreams expected anything like this. And so if you can drum up 23 more people or twist their arm or bribe them or anything, it would be a blast just to see us peek over that 3,000 download mark, just in terms of people being able to hang out, talk about, think about their spiritual life, and it's the psychology that comes into play, and see where that takes us. And that's really what this journey is all about. So I think I've covered all the basics, introduced myself and everything. What I want to talk about tonight seems, on the surface at least, really pretty basic. Let me put it that way. It's the power of language, and I don't think we spend very much time thinking about that. Now, even when I say thinking about that, we think in language. That's the symbols that we use to understand each other that is common. But there's also a language that is part of our internal narrative that is every bit as powerful as what we share with one another. So I am absolutely sure, I'm not so old that I don't remember hearing this phrase that now puts my teeth on edge, because the phrase goes this way, and you'll probably finish it when I say sticks and stones, and you'll probably finish it for me, right? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And that's a lie from hell and smells like smoke. That is absolutely not true. Because the reality is a broken bone can be repaired. But a broken heart, a damaged heart that is pierced through with the darts of language, oftentimes never recovers. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it doesn't. So language is an extremely powerful weapon, but it can also be an extremely powerful tool of healing as well. And that's not that we speak reality into being with our language, but we certainly bring it into clarity with our language. Now, there are a few things that I just want to throw out tonight for you to consider about language. And the first one is that the power of language is that it can take something or someone, in this case, it can take a person and turn them into an object. So when I set out to engage somebody that maybe I'm really frustrated with, which happens on a regular basis when I'm driving down the highway on the way to Lakewood, and anyone that's in Colorado knows exactly what I mean when I'm talking about I-25 in the morning, coming from the Northern Kingdom down into Denver. I mean, So my anger issues start showing up everywhere. Not that I have a lot, but it sure shows up there. And suddenly the person who's in front of me now becomes a jerk. And they are not a person anymore with a story. They are now a jerk. And most of the interactions we have with people that we have trouble with is oftentimes because we have now objectified them into a category or a label or anything of the sort. And that is the power of language. I can insult an object. That's easy to do, right? It doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have any feelings. It just exists at my pleasure. And so the language that I use can be used to objectify, create distance, and then condemn it, and then diminish it, and then dismiss it even. And that's the power that language has. We use it all the time. I'm using it as I do this podcast. And I can use language to either affirm and identify the personhood of the person I'm interacting with, or I can actually steal it away from them to say, you're not really a person, you're an idiot, you're a jerk, you're a moron, whatever the word is that you want to come up with. So language can be used to objectify the other person, and objectifying them always creates a distance that allows me to get away with treating them in a way that my friends I would never treat that way. I would never treat them that way. So that's probably the primary thing. I think even in Scripture when Jesus was talking about condemning somebody, and it's a phrase or it's a section of Scripture that most everybody loves to kind of quote, judge not and you shall not be judged. And he goes on to say that if you even go so far as to call somebody raka, which is empty-headed. That's an objectification of the person. And in that instance, Jesus points to the fact that you're in danger of the fires of hell, because it's objectifying the very person who has the image of God breathed into them, and they are so much more than that. And so this idea that language has an incredible power, and it can destroy and it can build up, it can encourage, it can empower the other person. The second thing I want to mention is that language can also be used to frame things. Now, what do I mean? The thing that I have noticed over the years in being a counselor and talking to people is that I tend to listen to their language a lot. And it's not because I nerd out listening to people's language. I mean, that can get pretty downright boring. But what I've begun to realize is that language betrays the internal language they use. So when somebody says, "I'm such an idiot," now I know what the internal language is. Because if they're not able to handle making a mistake without bludgeoning themselves with this, "I'm an idiot, I can't do anything right, I'm worthless, I'm not good for anything," that framing begins to impact how they move forward into life, even as they see themselves. You know, in psychology, we have this phrase that is often used. It's a very old concept. It's called the internal locus of control versus external locus of control. Internal locus of control means that I see myself as an active agent in the world around me, and I can impact what happens there and how it happens there. I am not a helpless victim to my circumstances. I am an active agent in it. On the other hand, external locus of control is entirely built on external circumstances, as the name implies. I don't have any control. The circumstances outside of me do, and I'm just stuck. I respond to whatever happens to me. And depending on the locus of my control, whether it's within me or it's outside of me, will have everything to do with the kind of decisions I tend to make. And that same thing fits into this idea of framing. And it's a word that I've used for a long time, because if I frame myself as somebody who is unlovable, unneeded, unaccepted, then guess how I will behave according to my frame. How I have framed life, how I have framed other people as being more important than me. Now you can say, well, isn't that a kind of a biblical value? Yeah, is putting more people ahead of me. Yeah, but that doesn't deny the need to take care of me, which requires a whole bunch of other discussion around boundaries and caring for oneself and all of that. So it can be used to frame the world around us, and it creates our understanding of reality and what is true and what isn't true. Now, I'm not talking about objective truth. Excuse me. I'm not talking about objective truth. We're not going to debate about, I don't think gravity is really real. I'm going to jump out the window just to see. None of us are going to debate that objective reality or truth. On the other hand, there is another kind of truth that is personal, subjective, and it's all usually focused around me and my value. And that frame has a direct impact on how I interact with other people. And there are lots of very sacrificial, self-sacrificial people in the world. And that's good. That's great. But usually, I often want to know what's the motivation for that. because sometimes, not always, but sometimes they end up having such a diminished view of themselves that their self-sacrifice is not really self-sacrifice. It's in the service of continuing the diminished view that they have of themselves. Now imagine for a minute what sacrifice looks like when I still hang on to a precious, beloved, valued, worthwhile, worthy view of myself. And that's a different stance to take. The other thing I want to mention is just how language is used, not only internally but externally, in terms of condemning and shaming or affirming and grace giving. And again, all of this that I'm talking about can be internal and external. See, we tell ourselves stories all the time. And so when somebody behaves toward us in a negative way or even a diminishing, insulting way, based on what we believe about ourselves, it may be completely in line with the negativity that we tend to encourage or we perpetuate in terms of ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves. On the other hand, it interferes with somebody who sees us as valued, as worthwhile, as loved. And I can tell you, and I've said this in other podcasts, is sometimes being accepted as we are, we would say, well, that would be good. That would be great if people did that. The problem is that it now wars with the internal story I tell about how unacceptable I am because I don't perform any particular way, I don't look a particular way, I don't think a particular way, and therefore I am unacceptable. So somebody comes along and says, I don't care about that stuff, I don't care about the differences we have with seeing the world in a different way or whatever, I accept you as you are. And I'm not sure what's worse, being condemned for those things that we are or being accepted for those things that we are. Because if we're accepted the way we are, then somebody is lying to me. And either it's the person that's accepting me as I am or it's me. And generally, we will always choose, not always, but we will choose the other person in a lot of cases. We will trust the lies that we're framing the world with, the lies and the language we use to frame the world with. We'll side with ourselves. And in that case, we will be good with ourselves on that one. Because the other person, if they knew us the way we know us, they wouldn't like us either. And so we land in that place. See, the other side of that coin is that language can be used to accept reality as it is, not condone reality as it is, but accept it as it is, and that creates the basis for change. And so language is incredibly powerful. It can guide us toward the truth or away from the truth of who we are. And when I say that, it's not the subjective truth of what we have, but the objective truth of what God says we are. Now, why is that so hard for us to accept? And in a lot of cases, we simply dismiss God, God's love. He always loves everybody, and if he loves everybody, then I'm just part of the mass, and nothing unique about me is really going to make anything different at all. But see, the language we use to frame the world around us, frame ourselves, frame other people. See, I can impact how I relate, I'll make it personal, how I relate to the other person if I see them as an ally or if I see them as an adversary. That one frame, that one kind of feint of hand of language is enough for me positionally, relationally and positionally, to relate in a particular way. I will see their behavior in a different light. I will see all the words that they use in a different light. I will fill in all the gaps of what they don't say in a different light. All of that is profoundly powerful. And we do that with ourselves and we do that with each other. And even when we talk about our spiritual journey with Jesus, we do that in interpreting what he has to say. So when he talks about loving us as we are, or displaying that love to the people that he interacted with during the time that he was on earth, we can say, well, that was great for them. But if he really knew me the way I know me, now think that through real quick, he wouldn't really do that. I'd be the exception to the rule here. So I think we have to contend with the internal language and our external language. And like I said, I think in a lot of cases, our language gives us away in terms of how we frame the world, how we understand the world, and tends to tip us off about how we frame our internal world with ourselves. And that cannot be dismissed. The problem is, it is so obvious and so familiar that we pay no attention to it at all. As a matter of fact, I've said this before. I've talked to people about this before, and they look at me like, yeah, so? And it's almost as if they're saying, well, okay, Captain Obvious, tell me something I don't know. But see, I think that's the very poison that it exists, is that it's small doses over a long period of time, and before too long, we are poisoned, deadly poisoned as a result of that. And our language is that pool that does that to us without us even really knowing anything about it. So even when good things happen and we're looking up at the ceiling waiting for the next shoe to drop, that is a language thing. We've done that before. We've assumed something there before. And that cannot not impact how I relate to another person, because how I relate to me has a impact on how I relate to you. It does. There's no way to get around that. And that's exactly why some of what I want you to listen into the conversation that I'm having with Dr. Matt Jones is so important, because if I can't figure out how to love myself as Christ loves me, which is self-love, then how can I really love you, really? And that's the thing. I think ultimately we have to, in order to pull that off, we have to split ourselves apart. And I'll love you, but I don't really have to love me. I can love you, but I don't have to love me. And that also, there has to be a framework or a scaffolding that makes that happen. And I would suggest to you that the language we use is that scaffolding. Now, this is not an easy thing. Now, like I said, it might seem very obvious, but when you get deeper into this labyrinth, you begin to realize, holy cow, there's a lot more here than meets the eye and more than I expected. Because the language I use about myself has an impact on how I relate to other people. If I objectify myself, I will probably objectify other people. And I may not even see it happening. See, the thing is, and again, this is just a sidebar, but we usually, when I use the word objectify, we usually use it in the context of lust. So objectifying somebody and their body in order to be used for our sexual pleasure. But I think we objectify ourselves in a lot of other ways that are every bit as profoundly poisonous as lust is. as a matter of fact, you can go even further and say we probably objectify God too. Like, what have you done for me lately kind of objectification. So that God is not a being to relate to, just like a person is not somebody to relate to, but he is something that I relate to in order to get something, rather than to be known by him or to allow myself to be known. And see, that's just it. The objectification destroys knowing and being known. And that impacts entirely, I think, how we go about engaging even the journey that we're on. I would suggest to you, and this is, again, this is kind of a short bunny trail here, but I would suggest to you in thinking about the people that hung out with Jesus, that they all brought their own crap with them. And Jesus, being who he was, had to fight his way through that because they had notions about who he was and they had notions about who they were. And you know, probably the one that struggled the most, I have no basis to make this claim, but I would just put it out there for consideration, and that would be Mary Magdalene. Because she had been a prostitute. She had been objectified by men for who knows how long. And when Jesus suddenly starts to relate to her as a person to be known, she had a struggle on her hands. Because how do you relate to somebody who wants nothing from you and values you as you are? And that's the challenge, ultimately, of our journey, not only with Jesus, but our journey with one another. And becoming aware of the language we use to frame the world around us, frame ourselves, frame our relationship with God, and trying to find a way to deconstruct it enough so that I can make it relationally based, not object-based. Which is interesting because in the world that we live in, particularly in technology, most of it is object-related. We've lost the personhood thing. Now, I can't make a computer a person, obviously. But we have, I think, in some cases, the interface, the user interface that we work with is object-based, and we have brought that over into our relationships with one another. I think that was really easy for us to do anyway, but it still is there. So anyway, a short rant for a Monday evening for you to think about in terms of language. I thank you for joining me tonight. It's just some other aspects, I think, of our existence and our journey in our journey with Jesus and with each other. And I pray that it would be helpful for you. Now, a few end of program reminders, as I often do at the end of the program. If you have questions, if I poked at something that you want reaction to or thought about or thinking about, you can DM me your questions on Instagram. You can hit my website and put a comment on the blog post, which is what the podcast kind of looks like on my website. But please interact. Let me know what you're thinking and what questions arises out of this. So DM your questions if you have any. I'd love to hear them. Love to get some fodder for more discussion. Subscriptions, if you want to subscribe, you can go to my website at drmitch.com. Upper right-hand corner, there's a subscription box. You hit that, and any new material that shows up on the website, you will be notified that it's there, and you can enjoy or curse at, whichever you prefer, the material that shows up there. And the podcasts go there, and other videos that will be probably showing up in due time. You can hear about them. So on the website, you can also follow on Instagram at the Psych Monologues, all lowercase. On Facebook, you can connect up with me there at ray.mitch. and in LinkedIn at Dr. Mitsch. Now remember, my last name is spelled Mitsch, not Mitch, and that will be a way to connect. If you want to follow just the podcast and nothing else, we can be found on any of the platforms that you consume podcasts on, which would include Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, any of those places. You can subscribe to us there. Finally, if you're interested in partnering with us to develop a scholarship fund for students to participate in silent retreats at CCU, we are always most appreciative and grateful for your partnership with us. You can enjoy a tax-deductible gift by giving to us either on the website. If you go to the CCU tab, there's a drop down to the silent retreats, and there's a donation button at the bottom that you can use to get a tax-deductible gift in supporting the silent retreats. If you'd prefer to do it by check, you can certainly do that. You can contribute that way by sending your check to 1615.tv, P.O. Box 1777, Castle Rock, Colorado, 80104. And again, you will enjoy the tax benefits of contributing to our scholarship fund. The last thing, and this is a heads up to students and other people, other alums out there that are interested in engaging with the silent retreat. We have 3 silent retreats this year, which I'm really excited about. 2 of them for active students, 1 for alumni, not only alumni of the silent retreat, but also alumni who have graduated from CCU and want to finally get in on the action with the silent retreat. But mark this on your calendars. The first one is October 21st through the 24th. You can register on the website under that Silent Retreats tab that I mentioned to you. You can register and indicate your interest in participating in it. So October 21st through the 24th, we're running out of space on that one. We are almost full. So if you know anybody who's an active student at CCU and wants to participate, send them there and get them to register as soon as possible. For my alumni retreat, it is November 4th through the 7th. And that, again, like I said, is for alums. They can participate there as well. We have more space in there. And so I think, again, the way we do these, there's 10 slots available for students to get in on. And the fall one is pretty full, but I think there are going to be spots available still for people to register. And then finally, in 2022, April 7th through the 10th will be the last retreat of the year. And that registration can happen. We are not full on that one yet, but when word starts bubbling out, it seems to take on a life of its own. So if you know, or you're interested, and you know somebody that wants to participate in the silent retreats, please send them our way. We would be more than happy to have them. We always are looking for donors and supporters that would contribute to the scholarship fund, that would make it possible for more students to come to these retreats. It's a challenge to do them, but it's something that I am entirely committed to do, along with Dr. Bill Saxby, who's my co-leader. We will do everything in our power to make it possible for students to participate and be a part of that. It is a life-changing experience. I don't think I'm overstating it. And so if you're interested or you want to get in on it, drop me a line or drop me a message on the website, or just register and put it in there. There's no harm in registering. I may not be able to get you in on it. I will let you know about that. But there is always some last minute turnovers oftentimes for students going to the silent retreat, just life and everything else that gets in the way. So It never hurts to get in on the registration. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So I think that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad that we were able to share 35 minutes or so of your time on a Monday evening. Join me again next week. Love ya. Later.